Thank you for joining us on Wednesdays.
It has been a great experience.
We've analysed, we've segmented, we've priced, and we've positioned,
Sliced and diced.
Stop the silos.
Gave practical advice.
Went all business and leisure.
We talked a lot about recovery best practices. Now it's time to put revenue management back into focus.
Let us help you become future-proof hotelier.
We will share our best practices and advice with you, starting from the beginning.
revenue hacks, back to basics.
Revenue hacks, back to basics.
Revenue hacks, back to basics.
Revenue hacks, back to the basics.
Revenue hacks, back to basics.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to episode 15 of Revenue Hacks. This week we are talking about sales and the basic sales you need to understand as a revenue manager. So we're going to get straight into it. Before we do, one point to note, next week's session's special. It's an open forum question and answer session on revenue management as a career. So get registered for that now, and you can see on the screen how to do that. Okay, now we've got a very special guest with us this week to talk about sales. We'll go through the introductions. Monika, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about what you do?
Absolutely, yes. I cannot wait. My background is hospitality based. I've worked in hotels for 12 years out of my 20-year career so far. I worked in active sales positions across the world, and I've been fortunate enough to work in different countries, Italy, UK, and the US as well. So I'm very excited to share my experience at hotels and my insights of what I have learned while working there. At the moment, I work for both Business Decisions and Notabilis, the two companies I've created to help businesses scale. It is a consultancy and coaching business. Before I started ranting about myself, what I wanted to do really was to share my admiration for you ladies. I have been following you for a very long time, and if I wasn't actively in your sessions, I was definitely on replay, learning more about revenue that I've always wanted, that I felt like I really, as a sales manager in a hotel, I have actively sought in the past to understand more of your world, because sales and revenue are two different worlds that are difficult to meet. But I think in this session, we'll understand how important it is to work together. So I chapeau to you, ladies, for sharing your knowledge and teaching everyone online for free of your long-term experience that you have accumulated and actively working every day. So thank you so much. And
Fabulous.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. We're going to jump to B now, who will be managing LinkedIn wonderfully as always today. B, you're going to say hello, then pop off to LinkedIn.
Yeah, hi all. So B, I'm the founder of MyOC, which is a revenue management consulting company specialized in optimization of revenue processes, systems, etc. So today I'm going to try to answer all your questions or ask the panel also some of your questions. Please feel free to send everything over, fire some questions, challenge us. We're here for that.
Fabulous. And Khristina?
Mute.
Olga.
I think we have a technical issue. Right. My name is Olga Sommer, revenue specialist with experience working in a luxury market as well as large corporate hotels. I'm also mentor, St. Julian scholar, and committee member. Welcome to the session. I hope you'll find it useful and interesting.
Thank you. I'm Susanne. I'm usually here every week, Revenue and Systems Director at Journey Hospitality here in Cheltenham. My background is actually half and half revenue and sales, so I'm really looking forward to this session. So let's get stuck in. Okay, so ladies, basic sales activity. Now, we all know that sales and revenue management, never the twain shall meet. So how do we today, through this session, start to bridge that gap? And I don't want to say stop the silos because that's been done to death, but really revenue and sales should work much closer together. So maybe we should just explore a little bit about what the function of a sales manager, what that function is for revenue and sales. How do we bridge that gap? What's your thoughts on what sales even means? What does it even mean?
I think,
well, for me, oh, we have Khristina.
I know, I didn't actually realize I was on mute. There we go, my turn. Next thing for me, that sales is the person who's always, almost like a business development manager. They're trying to capture that person. They're exploring the market and exploring the area for the holes in the market that we can actually get into and promote the hotel. That also falls now to revenue, though. So I think it's actually where everything needs to go hand in hand, because the revenue person or the reservation agent is the person who's giving the sales the leads to be able to move forward. And, it's almost like a two-person job when technically sometimes it can be in one. I'm very much into that it should be, one person that kind of creates that lead and helps share the information. But I think it's all down to people just being afraid to share over the last few years. I think sales managers are afraid to share all the data with us. And I think we're always afraid to share the data with the sales manager, because I always think there's always that you're going to steal my thunder element. And that can cause huge friction when KPIs don't match, when budgets don't match, when information doesn't match, and especially when sales don't actually understand the revenue function and how your segments or how what their job has an impact on in your day-to-day, basically.
For me, the basic sales activities, what I would expect revenue manager to do is being able to do, building relationships with key bookers, whether corporate or travel agents. I think that's kind of a given. It doesn't actually even have to be revenue. It starts from reservations, as kind of Khristina made at that point as well. It can be anyone, also to do site visits, farm trips, representing hotels at WTM, for example, being able to do show runs, negotiation, that's one of them. I've done my fair share of being at a negotiation, whether it's a group bookings or large kind of agreements. So I think it saves a lot of time as well. Revenue manager can jump into the meeting, will have all the peaks and troughs of the business, will be able to provide availability and the rates. So it kind of, I think the best when it's two people at the table, because it saves a lot of time instead of, playing this broken telephone. So for me, this is the whole range of the things that I would expect revenue manager to do, kind of sales activities.
Monika, what are your thoughts?
Well, I will tell you a little story. So in one of the hotels that I was working in London, I was so frustrated because I could not understand why every time I asked for a better rate for a business that came to me directly, I was told no. So I definitely felt that friction. So I went to the revenue manager and I said, can you show me the system that you use? Can you teach me? I want to understand why I cannot have that rate, right? So I think what I was looking for was more of a direction. So I think there's a bigger problem there. I think the problem is on the top. I think the problem comes from the leadership. It is how it was always structured historically, right? Revenues on one side, sales on the other side. And through the years, these two roles kind of evolved, but and they never met, but I think they actually complement each other. So if I was going to revenue manager and said, what is the business that we actually need? What kind of segments are we working on? What are the segments that we want more for our hotel? And if we actually had visibility of the data that we just talked about, that if I share my data with revenue and revenue shares the data with me, we kind of close that gap and we start working together. It means that the revenue manager can tell me, look, for this hotel, I need more groups. For this hotel, I need more corporate. Then I have a direction as a salesperson. And I think the issue is with the sales roles, that's my personal opinion, is that the sales, as it evolved, it kind of dropped the active sales role in that sales position. Because yes, you're doing show rounds. Yes, you're going to WTM and other travel shows. Yes, you're talking to the corporates and creating relationships. But where is the time for the sales manager to do proactive sales? But strategically, revenue and sales can work together and say, okay, let's create a strategy. We need more groups. What are we going to do? And that is the sales job, to go proactively seek for that business for the hotel. And when the KPIs, and that again goes back to the leadership, when the KPIs are aligned instead of being conflicting, then everyone wins. The hotel gets more revenue, sales look good because they're actually finally doing sales, what is their main job. Revenue is happy because it makes look them good because they're actually getting more business. So I think it's a win-win for everyone. For me, it is a no-brainer, but unfortunately, it doesn't work like that today.
I think there are some really good points there, and I guess the function of the sales function for revenue, really revenue and sales can build that strong partnership by revenue proving and giving the evidence and kind of saying, look what sales have done, and there's no need to be so holding everything so close together as there really. Revenue managers can lead and share what is actually going on and build that brilliant rapport with sales, because with our heads down, bums up and spreadsheets and data, revenue managers are not naturally aligned to being front-facing, gregarious to go out to get the business. So that complementary aspect is important, hugely important. Yeah, I think that's really interesting. Anyone else get anything to throw in?
Yeah, well, I just Silvia left a comment which I fully agree. The reasons why there is a friction, because by definition there are two different functions, sales and revenue, and that's where the friction is coming from. But yes, it's down to the KPIs and the leadership. It does require strong leader. Most of the times it will be general manager, but you also will remember we had Jonathan Liu, for example, some time ago as a guest host, and he said they actually head office removed that function from general managers in GLH. So that straight away removes that, business acumen. That straight away you're losing the information you could potentially get from staff and from guests. You lose that information. So straight away it goes to the head office. So I worked in hotels where the relationship worked really well between sales and revenue. But most of the times it was in more standalone boutique hotels where you have a small executive team and you truly support each other and you share the information. And that's where I was representing, for example, Duke's Hotel in Moscow and St. Petersburg, and also the Westbury Hotel. I looked for the key markets. If you have a unique skill set, the language, it does make sense to put the best assets in there where they will bring the best results. So it is possible to achieve, but it does require the strong leadership. The main issues I've seen kind of not working this relationship really well is actually in head offices, and that's just because the decisions are made head office and communication is just not flowing.
Just one final thing on this then. I think that when we're talking about basic sales activities for revenue managers, that on-site functionality about understanding conversion, understanding reservations coming in, even right down to being able to conduct showdowns and fan trips, if that is a very basic start for revenue managers, they should know what's going on there. Then to your point, Monika, the pure sales is actually out there generating the business that is 100% within their skill set. Yes, communicating closely with revenue, but that basic skill set for revenue has to be about understanding the process of sales that happens on site. Is that fair to say? Is that?
Yeah.
I would say so, but I think in most of the realities in hotels with sales managers, you're so overwhelmed with the incoming emails, the show rounds, the meetings that you have to attend that are more operational. And let's talk about that. Let's talk about the meetings. If I, as a sales manager, have more strategic meetings where we decide strategy, and that is if I can have revenue managers invite me to their meetings, I can understand more of what kind of business we need. I can be more present, and definitely, operational meetings are great, but perhaps there's another way to share that information instead of sitting in a meeting. Okay, what kind of meeting space, who the companies are coming to occupy today in the meeting space. Yes, it's all great, but I don't need to sit in a meeting to understand that. Absolutely. It's better if I spend my time in a revenue meeting where I can understand what kind of business I need to bring to the hotel. And that goes back to the sales managers don't really have space and time to do proactive sales. And not every sales, let's talk about that too. Not every sales manager wants to do proactive sales. They just sit back, and it's much more comfortable to do a show round than picking up the phone and actually dialing the companies and saying, do you have business for me? But again, it's a leadership problem. It's we have to see what kind of salesperson do we want in our hotel. What skill set does that salespeople need to have? And again, if the skill sets are transferable from revenue to sales, which are certain skills that are transferable, and if we can teach each other the missing parts of the skill set, I think everybody wins. Again, to the point that I made earlier.
Yeah, it's that collaboration.
That at the moment, because obviously COVID, there's a lot of people that aren't actually employed, and there's a lot of people out of jobs. I think it needs to come, again, effectively, leadership is key, but people need to go back into that area or back into that lifetime where we owned every job that needed to be done in the hotel. There was no such thing as it's not my job. And when we've got the likes of general managers or revenue people, or even just say it's a salesperson who doesn't want to help in revenue, that's where that breakdown happens. And then that's where that question is, well, why should I be telling you this information if you're not willing to do it? In particular, especially GMs in small hotels who don't see themselves as the salesperson for that particular hotel, who don't want to engage in anything because they prefer to wait for head office to do it. That's not taking the bull by the horns and going out and getting business for your hotel. So you can't say you don't have sales because you are that salesperson. Simple. And it just goes to show it is really top-down leadership. And that's something that we struggle. And especially if your GM is a leader who thinks like that, who's very one-minded and narrow-minded, he's just there to manage the hotel. That's when you as a revenue person will struggle, because you don't have that support that you can actually go and check all the arrivals, check all your reports, see where your holes are, and start contacting them bookers who've actually dropped off the face of the earth during COVID, as part of your recovery.
I think there's there's a big lesson just there before we move on to corporate sales, which I think is another big topic. The one thing about hotel leadership, just to hotel owners out there watching, hire a rooms biased GM every time. That's all I'm going to say. Let's move on to corporate sales.
Yeah, really good point. Can I make a comment in regards to communication, because I'm really surprised by Monika's comment. If I'm really honest, for me, revenue meetings should happen on a weekly basis, and I would not conduct a revenue meeting if the sales is not there. Because for me, half of the time is, okay, I represent my information, but the rest is actually half of the meeting is spent going through the pipeline, going through the new RFPs, going through the production, going through what sales team has done in the last week, and what does their next week looks like. This is what I'm expecting sales managers to present, and sometimes there will be several sales managers on the meeting. It's a once a week for an hour and a half maximum, but this is when you exchange information. This is when you identify where you have the gaps and where the sales should be focusing. If it is a more corporate and big organization, okay, fine, fair enough. You have also maybe sales and marketing separately from the property, in which case those meetings could be more strategic, and they could be once a month or bi-weekly, But you still have, because distribution should be present there, because to build the sales campaigns, that takes time as well. And that could be strategic. So I think there are multiple ways how to bridge the communication gap. But that is, again, my expectation from the sales, to be present in those meetings and be active on them.
That is exactly how it should work.
Yeah. Okay, now corporate sales. I think that we describe revenue and room sales as the dark arts, but actually there is a darker art, and it is definitely corporate sales. So when you speak to non-hotel sales people and they think, oh, I'm in sales, it's all bluff and bluster and you're out there doing all the shiny stuff, you think, well, let's just introduce you to the world of hotel sales, to Lanyon, to RFPs, to closed bids, the whole shebang that goes along with corporate sales. My goodness, you really need to know your onions. So what can we share for our reviewers today that actually will give an insight into that corporate sales world and how to crack it? How do we crack, as revenue managers, an understanding and bring some of that business in if we don't have a sales manager on site?
I think for me, the most important thing is that you're checking the bookings that are coming in and you're checking the arrivals 110%. And you are actually flagging that information to your front office, saying, find out all the details for this person. Ask them, are they here on a regular basis? If you see, as you do your res checks, you see who's available and who's here all the time. Try and stoke the fire with having that conversation with them. And if it's not that person, get a booker. And have a tracker for it. I know that that's what I was doing for years and years in hotels. That's what I was trained to do for years in hotels. And I still continue to do that even as a group revenue manager. We check everything. We see what's coming in and we go from there. I think the hardest thing for someone to do is a cold call. And I think Monika will be able to give us a little bit more of an insight into how to do that, because there's nothing more. It's just very strange for us as people to actually make that call and have that, no, it's not me, or no, I don't want to stay there, or I'm not that person, and that's where people get deflated in the pipeline when they're trying to build up that business and, taking time out. And I think revenue managers sometimes can be very overclouded by that, because sometimes we look at the data a bit too much and then we decide, oh, well, I've done that call, it's not happening, instead of trying to knock down the door and find where the next point of contact is on that particular account, basically.
But is it realistic? Sorry, Olga, I just want to know, is it realistic for a revenue manager to sit, because checking arrivals lists and doing your kind of research is comfort zone stuff. This is the comfort zone of the revenue manager. They know their reservations, they know the rates, they know their segmentation, tick, tick, tick. But like Monika says, how do you then get out that door and into the world of pitching, presenting, negotiating when you're starting so comfortably?
Start small.
How do we?
I think for us, we have, each property that we have in our portfolio actually has a little, I'm going to call it presentation that we use. We've done something up. We've done some really nice work on kind of corporate pitches and everything. And it's about, you're constantly calling, we constantly call, we try our best to find who we need to speak to. We would never really stop until we found that person. And then obviously when you submit even a rate, you're kind of following up with them to see what they're getting from everybody else, and like vice versa. Even I had something when I was in Waterford this week again with somebody else, and I was kind of going, well, what are they giving you there? And did you know that we'll give you this? And, we're part of a larger chain, so you can have X, Y, and Z with this. And you're trying your best to push as much as you can to do it. I think revenue managers aren't so comfortable anymore. When it comes to, they're quite happy to do it sometimes, but I think that's because they're afraid of giving their business to sales, or they want to have that key relationship with the person who's been emailing constantly, and they don't want to have that divide or a breakdown where things can happen. And I think there needs to be very much a big trust, a big, huge trust kind of conversation had with people now about, it's not everyone, it's just not your job, it's everyone's job. Yeah. Simple. So you need to be able to share and trust the knowledge that you have. And if you don't have a proper sales plan, I'm sure we'll be able to help you build one. Susanne is great for that one.
I would take one step back from even before, prior to arrivals check. It starts from reservations team, coach your reservations team. This is the reason why we're asking, what are your purpose of stay? We want to find out names of the companies, and that's how we create the leads and pass the information. There is so much also. There is newsletters you can find right now. What are the new conference taking place? What are the new companies moved into the area? There is a lot right now, I think, support. I disagree that revenue managers maybe not necessarily comfortable with doing, they can start small. I think it depends on level of experience and exposure to the sales activities, but it can start small and then build on that. I would like to know maybe a sales team to share dark sort of arts about RFPs and Lanyon, for example. Equally, it's about communication, coaching each other and sharing that information. And that's kind of learning and picking up from that. Doing site visits, that's the beginning. Susanne?
Just before we come on to Monika, because my point's going to lead straight on to what I'm sure you're about to say. Both Khristina and Olga have started with the comfort zone of revenue management. Now, if you've got a sales plan, that new business development, how you go out there and get to the business, we're starting off with comfort zone stuff. Here's our little arrivals list. Great. But there are reports out there that will tell you the economic activity that's going on in your area, what's changing by industry, more pure sales. Now, that's not about anything that goes on in the hotel. That's about getting out and finding that business and bringing it in. Over to you, Monika.
That is exactly, yes. And I think the most uncomfortable thing, even for sales manager, is the cold calling, is the going and getting the proactively looking for the new business. Because most of the time it's account management, is the business that we already have in-house trying to get more business. The active sales is completely different. It takes you out of your comfort zone. You have to deal with getting so many no's and rejections a day, and not many people are comfortable with that. So let's start from the beginning. When we hire a sales manager for the hotel, what skill set do we want that hotel manager to have? And I think part of it needs to be proactively looking for new business. So bringing the new business, and there should be a personal KPI tied to that. Because if I work 9 to 5 or work to 9 to 7 as a sales manager, I can always justify I was in this meeting, I did this, because I was working really hard and I didn't have time to do the proactive sales. And there's a million excuses for that because the focus is not there. So the focus needs to be for the sales managers to do the proactive sales. And I got so passionate about sales when I went to the US. I worked for a hotel company. It was a hotel chain as a sales manager. And I was overwhelmed by how different was sales done, generalizing in Europe. I was coming from Italy, and how it is done in the US. In that specific hotel, it was like we're working for a corporate company. It's not even a hotel, because we come in the morning and we have a list of companies, a list of people that have stayed with us, let's say sports groups that have stayed with us the year before, that we are going to call. So the focus was on proactively bringing the business, either bringing the business back or looking for a new business. And we would just call and call. Say, are you coming back? Can you send me your schedule? I was going to schools looking for new business because we had that segment. We had the segment of school trips coming to this area. So we wanted more of that. So it is much more strategic, much more with the direction driven, again, with the numbers in the back. So with the revenue helping to drive that forward. I just need an American approach is absolutely needed right now. And the roles are so evolved right now that they just need to complement each other instead of creating more friction.
Just think that really important distinction about getting out there and driving new business versus what happens typically on site. What happens on site is equally hugely important, but to me, they're quite different skill sets. To get the constant rejection, to get on the phone, to actually it's cold leads. It's cold leads, and you're actually going out saying,
the highs and lows of sales.
Yeah.
I think that's why some revenue managers are afraid to do it, because when the highs are there, Monika, I'm sure can agree with this, it is epic. You are on top of the world. You are invincible. When the lows are there, they are so low. And that's why you're trying to always figure out how to dig yourself out of the hole. But the way I look at it is it's kind of the same revenue. When you've got a gap in your forecast and it's 12 weeks out, who do you rely on? Sales. Who do you rely to push the digital sales team, you know, and you're in that hole or in that low because you don't have a proper plan in place for the future.
So just on that then, if you are a revenue manager on property, without a digital marketing person, without a salesperson, you are everything. What do you prioritise? How do you I know the answer to this, we all do, but how do you prioritise, ladies?
I would still focus on building effective relationship with bookers. I know, at least in my career, I always had a few travel agents, a few companies. I knew bookers really well, and if there was a gap and something that needed to be, you know, I could offer extra space, I had those key accounts I could call with some help and support. I think you need to have it. It's the same as a sales team. You would have a few bookers that, you know, you can definitely utilize those relationships when needed.
Does that include entertaining, Olga, when you're taking them out for dinner and a few glasses of wine?
I've done my fair amount of site visits and show runs. Yes, yeah, and unfortunately, yeah, it does come out as additional time. But I agree with the point that Khristina was making earlier, that it doesn't matter who brings the business. We're all in this together. The goal is to achieve the more revenue, and whoever is the best person to do that, that's how it should be. You know, that's you utilize those resources. Yes, and that's why I'm kind of quite comfortable doing sales. Just done a fair amount of this.
Oh yeah, Khristina.
Yeah, I have to agree with Olga. I think as we said, we're all in this together. But I think when you're prioritizing things, I have a checklist. I'm very like, my checklist, my notebook is God. If I lose that, I'm dead. But you know, I always kind of focus on my little revenue reports at the start, and then I go from there and plow into everything else because I take care of the sales and the digital side and everything. And it's about pushing everything as much as we can. And as Olga says, it does eat into your day. It can eat into it, but you just need to be able to say, okay, I'm going to focus for about 4 hours on this, drive as much as we can, and make a plan from there and get someone else on board. Because you're almost like you're selling your ideas as well to the hotel team to join you on your journey. That's what it is. If you can sell that to the hotel team, you can sell anything to a guest.
Absolutely, 100%. Monika, anything you want to add?
I totally agree. There is no escape. Sales is not just a sales person's job, it's everybody's job at the hotel, starting from, you know, saying hello to the new guests who just walked in. So yeah, I think ownership, accountability, aligned KPIs, it just needs to be there, and sharing information.
The only thing I'm going to add, because I agree with all you ladies too, it starts off, I know you know what I'm going to say, but it starts off with your annual plan. You need to have a plan drafted at the beginning that includes new business development, all your market segmentation laid out, KPIs, sales targets, account management plans that sit underneath every single one of your segments with your ADRs defined, and then that's communicated with your forecasting. You identify the gaps and you plug them. So it has to be strategic from top down. Sales and revenue and the GM should act as one and get that annual plan delivered. And that is gospel. If you've got a good revenue management plan, it's unbreakable. Sales come in with the creativity, marketing to come in with the brand and the experience and messages, then you've nailed it. You've nailed it. Okay,
there you go.
So that's it. We've solved all the problems. All done. So just coming on to writing the sales plan then, where would a revenue person, just thinking about sales, like that account management plan, what it looks like, your sales strategies, where you're going to take them from your annual plan, where would a revenue person start, do you think? What's the right, because we all know we love our segmentation and we can talk about data till it's coming out of our ears, but let's then say, okay, how do we schedule appointments? How many should there be? What industries are we targeting, etc.? How does that salesperson start to put that plan together?
It's collaboration. Usually start from the budget, start working together with director of sales together. Once you have the budget, which does require initial work already, together with two departments, and then you take it to writing the strategic plan.
What if you don't have a salesperson? What if you don't have a director of sales? You have to do it as a revenue person, and you're kind of like, I've just walked into a new job. I've been employed because of my revenue commercial skills. Write a sales plan.
You still start with what are the key segments you will be focusing And you break it down. You break it down still. You write your activities. You write, because it has to be seasonality. It needs to be taken into account as well. And you need to start from that and then breaking down to small. You see the bigger picture and break it down to small targets by month, by segment.
I totally agree.
I love the way Susanne
sales
says that
plan.
you've gone into a new job. It is a new job, but it's you need to map everything correctly as well. If the segments aren't there, you need to actually map everything correctly and create the segments, because many times you go into a hotel, and we've done this, guys, we've seen it ourselves. You go into a property, there's no segments. There's nothing. There's no even proper tracking sometimes, and that's what scares me, that people are still expecting sales to pull off when they're not tracking everything correctly. So you build your segments, look at everything, and then analyze the business on the books for the last few years and go from there. But you're looking at your segments. You can't just say you're going to give a huge focus onto corporate and change your OTA transient into corporate people, because that's not how it works. You need to have real logic behind it, and you need to see what's the new upcoming businesses happening, be it, you know, a big new office block that's going to happen, or you know that Google is going to move in next year, and you really need to assess all them things, because having the likes of a branded channel over your door, or branded, you know, a brand name over your door can be beneficial. However, when they send you that big, huge mega volume document, none of them corporates might even stay with you. It's a great way to assess and see what's in your area or what's in your city, but they don't stay with you. So you need to be able to make a plan based on them documents and everything that you have to hand, like travel, click data, everything that comes in with corporate wise, and talking to your OTAs, because again, all the OTAs do what now? Corporate. Booking.com is on Concord GDS. You've got Expedia who do their own one, you know, so you need to talk to these guys as well to see where their business is coming from. They will share it, but they kind of expect you to give it to them as well at the same time.
Anyone else? Anything else to add?
I will just say that any strategic sales plan needs to be backed up by data. As going back to the first experience that I shared, I didn't have that data to understand why I'm getting a no. And that's exactly what it is. If we have the data and a plan, you're on a good path. You can always adjust the strategy as you go, but you have to have it. You cannot just blindly go in and we need business and just go get it, because it needs to make sense. And that sense is the revenue.
Okay, just before we wrap up, I just want to mention again about next week's episodes, because a bit of a game changer for our Revenue Hacks with open forum, so you can email your questions across, and Rita will put up the link. It's about career in revenue management, and Thomas Finn will be joining us, who actually is in our audience. Hi, Thomas. We look forward to seeing you next week. There's so much more that we could say on sales, so I suspect this will be an ongoing conversation, but thanks so much to Monika for joining us. Absolute pleasure to have you. And thanks, ladies. We'll see you all next week. Don't forget, you can follow us on Instagram, Revenue Hack, and there it shows you what we're up to out with this weekly episode. Wine is involved. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you. Enjoy sales.
Bye.